Hey everyone, welcome to Studio Review. It's Kyle, and in this video, we're going to be reviewing Restaurant Menu. The goals of the studio were to work with a fellow coder to create an application, so working with a teammate, understanding the requirements to design the classes, so reading our material first, designing it on paper, and be able to implement these classes, which are going to be a little bit more complex than our past studios. So as mentioned before, this is going to be a group studio, which means we get to work with a fellow coder. This is very important to start learning because in most coding job situations, you're going to be working with a team or at least one other individual when creating an application. So it's great to work on the communication between yourself and another person to share ideas and come up with a common solution. So that's what we're going to do today in the studio. Furthermore, we're going to take an additional step before we start actually coding today, which is we're going to design our classes first, present our idea, and then begin to write our code. In this case, we'll leave ourselves open to any kind of constructive criticisms from our fellow coders. This helps us refine our ideas and refine our classes before we actually start writing code. So if our fellow coders catch any errors within our design, we don't waste our time implementing bad code. So let's begin designing. We're going to create a restaurant menu. Now, not even talking in coding terms yet, we're going to think of a real-world example of a restaurant's menu. We need to take a look at what a menu is and what information it typically has inside of it. The first thing that sticks out is that menus have menu items, the actual food or beverage that a person can order from this restaurant. So therefore, we have two main things we need to design for: the menu itself and the individual menu items. Now, when picking what we want to design first, I'm going to start with the smaller piece, the menu item, that the menu contains, because a menu contains multiple menu items. So let's begin designing that. We have to ask the question, what do we know about items on menus? Again, we're not talking about coding here, we're really just talking about a real world example. When we look at a restaurant menu's items, what do we see? The first and foremost would be the name of the item. Is it a grilled cheese, chicken fingers, a salad? Secondly, I would expect a description there. If I am going to order the salad, then I would like to know exactly what's in the salad and what I'm going to get when I order it. Third, the price. If I'm on a budget or just absolutely curious, I want to know the price of the salad before I order it. Next, the category. Is the salad an entree? Is it a side? What exactly is it? And then finally, is it new? Is this salad something that the chef just came out with? Or is this something that's been around on the restaurant's menu for ages? These are just some of the things that can be on our menu item. So I'm going to write this down. And then we're going to move on to designing the menu. And again, we ask, what does the menu contain? In this case, the first thing that pops out in my head is that the menu will contain, like we said before, all of the menu items. Everything that our customer will be able to buy, including that salad. And the second thing maybe our clientele would like to see, when was our menu last updated? To show that we're placing new trendy items onto our menus to keep our customers coming in through the door. These are just some of the things that our menu can contain. Of course, there can be a lot more. So let's remember this and review our design. Our menu item had these 5 things about it: the name, description, price, category, and is new. Our menu had a list of those menu items, as well as the date of when it was last updated. In this case, last updated. Now that we have our design written down of how we want to create these two classes, menu and menu item, we were to present this design to a classmate. Again, I just came up with a design that I felt was acceptable, but a classmate or a fellow coder could have another perspective. So it's always great to talk about our designs, and then always keeping an open mind as we do so. Once my classmate and I how to improve each other's designs, we need to implement with what we've come up with here. I look at menu and menu item, 2 different classes that we will have to implement. But the question is, which one do we implement first? Looking at menu, the first thing we would have to build is a list of menu items. If we built menu first, menu items wouldn't exist yet. Therefore, we'd have some tough times hooking up that list of the menu items to something that doesn't exist yet. So looking at menu item, I see it has no dependencies on any custom class that we would make. Therefore, I'm going to start creating menu item first in this application. So let's do that now. To begin, we need to create a new project. Click New Project. Nothing new here. We're going to call it Restaurant Menu. Finish. Our project's created. So like we said, we're going to create that menu item class first. So we're going to create that new menu item class. Press Enter, and our class has been created. When we're always creating a class, we need to make sure that we do our 3 things. We always have our class variables at the top, our constructors, and our methods. We said we wanted our menu item to consist of 5 things. The first thing being a name. We know that the name of a menu item is going to be like cabbage, or grilled cheese, or salad. To me, these sound like strings. So my name variable is going to be a string. Furthermore, we know class variables have to be private. We don't want them accessible to external or other classes. So therefore, I put the keyword private. We said we're going to create it a string, and then I'm going to call it name. The next is description. The same thing, private. We know our description to be a string, and then the name of our variable. Next is the price. Prices can have decimals in them. As we talked about in our previous videos, if they have decimals in them, I'm going to put it as a double. So we say private, double, and then price. Next is a category. Category can be entree, appetizer, and so forth. So we say private, string, category. Then finally, is new. Is new is a question. Is it new? Yes or no? True or false? Therefore, I'm going to set this as a Boolean. Call it is new. We've created now 5 new class variables that have not been initialized to anything. Typically, we want to initialize these class variables within our constructors, which is our next step. So let's go ahead and do that. We need to create some constructors that help us build our instances of menu items. So we have to ask ourselves, which variables have to be initialized or set to something so that menu item can be useful? I know that on a menu, if I don't see at least a name, a description, and a price, that won't be very useful for me because I need to know what the name of the menu item is, what it's going to consist of, and how much I'm going to be spending. So the first constructor I'm going to build is the one that takes in all the necessary elements as the parameters. So to do that, I say public and then menu item. And in these parentheses, I include all the parameters that I want the user to provide to create a menu item. So now when a menu item is created, we are forcing the developer, ourselves or someone else using our class, to provide that name, description, and price. So now let's take those parameters and set them to our class variables. How we access our class variables is using the this keyword. So I'm going to say this.name equals name. This.description equals description. This.price equals price. Remember, name here corresponds to this parameter, while this.name corresponds this variable at the top. We also have category and is new. These values are not passed in through the parameters, so we can initialize them to something else. So I'll say in the category is not categorized. Hopefully I spelled that right. And then I'm going to say is new equals false, since we'll just assume it's not new since it's not being passed in. Great. So these are being initialized through our parameters, and these are being initialized by hard-coded values. So what if we didn't want these two to be initialized with hard-coded values? Then we would have to pass them in through the parameters. One thing that Java lets us do is create multiple constructors. So that's what I'm going to do here. I have a constructor here that takes in only the vital information. And now I'm going to create a second constructor that takes in the vital information as well as optional information. So the name, string, description, double price, and now the optional information. So I'm going to copy what I had up here originally, paste it. Now I'm going to set the category and the is new value inside this new constructor. Perfect. Now we have 2 constructors, one that takes in only that vital information like we talked about previously, and a secondary constructor that allows the developer, us or someone else, to provide all the information in constructor class how they see fit. Finally, one last thing to create this menu item is that in our methods section, 2 very important types of methods that we need to include when we have class variables are the getters and setters. These getters and setters access and mutate the class variables that we've declared. Since our class variables are private, there's no way that someone can access the name of our menu item outside of the class unless we provide a getter. And there's no way that they can change the name if they wanted to if we don't provide a setter. So let's go ahead and do that now for all of our class variables. As you can see here, I've created a getter that returns a string, aka our name, from this class. I've created a setter that does a set name, passes in a name as a parameter, and sets our class variable name to whatever has been passed in. This is how we create those getters and setters methods. Now let's create them for every other variable. Whew. And there we go. All of our getters and setters now are here in this class, so we can access and mutate any class variable that we see fit. We can now access or mutate any class variable that we want. Now that menu item is created, let's go ahead and create menu now, where we need to place in that list of menu items as well as the date that it was last updated. Now we keep mentioning last updated in that it should be a date. Now a date can be a string. Technically we can have 12-1-2020, but Java offers us something even better to help manage our dates, because dates and times can actually be pretty tricky. We know that dates and times can be different depending on where you are in the world. Therefore, we're going to be using the class date in this studio for last updated, because it really does help us keep track of the proper dates and times for our users and for ourselves. So we come back up here to the source file, create that menu. The first thing that we needed to create was that list of menu items. As always, we do our class variables at the top, and we're going to create an array list to contain all of our menu items. We do this because array lists can shrink and grow depending on how many menu items we want to include on this menu. We always set our class variables to private. I'm going to just call it menu items. And there we go. And the second thing we needed to create was the last updated date. As always, we have to do private. Let's type in date here, and let's say last updated. And we're going to import the class. As always, we need to create our constructors next. I don't see us taking in any parameters for this menu because we don't need anything to create a menu. It can have no menu items and it can have no last updated. So I'm going to say public menu, no parameters. What I'm going to do is that I'm going to initialize last updated to a new date, just so we don't have it set as null. Now that we've done that, as always, if we have class variables, we have to create getters and setters. So let's go ahead and do that for both menu items and last updated. And there we go, perfect. Now we've successfully created our menu class that also utilizes the menu item class. Perfect. We are now ready to submit our work and create a repository to push our project. So let's go ahead and do that now. So go to your GitHub account and then go to /new or click new to create this new repository. We come down here and we're going to create the repository name, which I'm going to call restaurant menu, provide a small description, keep it public, and then create the repository. Great, now that I see that I have my repo created, I'm going to scroll down a little bit and it's going to give me a few commands here to run. Before I run any of that code, I need to make sure that I open up a new bash terminal or your git bash terminal. I'm just using the general terminal here on my computer, and I'm going to cd into the directory that restaurant menu is stored. Cool, I'm now in restaurant menu. Looking back at github.com, we see that we have two options: create a new repository on the command line or push an existing repository from the command line. We would only want to push an existing repository from the command line if we did a pull from github.com to start our assignment. We created a new fresh assignment from IntelliJ. So that tells me we're going to need to run these commands on the command line instead. So what I do is I do git init to initialize that .git file. I first do add -a. I do my git status. I have quite a few things that I'm going to be committing now to GitHub. So I do git commit -m, and I always do first commit. Perfect. Then I'm going to run this command, which is adding the remote origin to that Git URL that's provided on github.com. Make sure it's this exact URL inside that command. Your URL will be different. I'm going to press enter, and then I'll do git push origin master. I have to provide some credentials, and then we do our push. Awesome. Going back to our website and then refreshing after we pushed, we see that it changes into this, where all of the files that we had originally in our restaurant menu are now pushed up to github.com. Awesome, this is exactly what we need to see. Awesome job, everyone. We finished the studio. Hopefully we got a lot out of working with another classmate, as well as learning those new concepts like date and how to design our classes before we implement. There's no bonus missions for this studio, so we're finished here.